What's up, everybody? Welcome into another YouTube live show. I am John Kurtz. I'm realizing behind me the door is not totally closed, so apologize for the sloppiness on my end. Been a long day. Just did an hour-long live podcast after the workday, so there's been a lot going on here. But as always, there's a lot going on in conference realignment. As the world turns here in the world of conference realignment, we've got updates on the Pac-12. We've got updates on the ACC, because you essentially have two competing conference realignment storylines going on at the same time, like concurrently right now. One of those would be, and I would say the one that's maybe from a broader sense taking up more of the spotlight lately, it's actually the ACC and what's going on with Florida State and Clemson, particularly Florida State being very aggressive with their public comments. Sounded like it started internal and private. Now it has moved to public comments about trying to get unequal revenue sharing in the ACC, how far behind the ACC is going to be with their television contract extending into the mid to late 2030s now. Florida State has really started to push the boundaries on that. And there were a couple articles written in great detail about Florida State and the ACC and that situation, one from ESPN and one from War Chant Illustrated, the Florida State On 3 site. There was a very in-depth article there with, I think, some pretty powerful quotes as far as what it means for the ACC and Florida State long term. So there's a lot to unpack there. And there's really one big giant question there, and that is, how confident is Florida State actually in trying to do this? How confident are they that they could actually maneuver their way out of the grant of rights? And would, I guess the secondary question would be, would another conference be willing to extend an actual invite if they're not totally sure what's going to happen with Florida State or Clemson or whoever and that grant of rights that's going on there? Would they actually be able to get out of it? So there is one storyline, and I'm going to read you the updates on all of that coming up later on in the show. I think we will start with the Pac-12, though, because we have two developments here, okay? Two developments. One, we got a new Sports Business Journal podcast, which is always excellent, with Andrew Marchand and John Oran. And the latest thing that we heard there is that they say, I mean, look, I'll just read you the direct quote right now. They said, we're both sensing that there could be one school that leaves, and once one leaves, then all hell breaks loose. That was in reference to the timeline to this media rights negotiation. A lot of their discussion about it this week centered around the fact that, hey, theoretically, they would have a lot of time to get this done before, in a conventional sense, the deal would have to get done. But because of the dynamics out there of schools panicking, not controlling the public narrative, letting things get to where they're at right now, that actually could wind up being more troublesome, more problematic. They'll have less time because of that, because they're just losing this public narrative and somebody could panic and want to leave. So there's that interesting part of the discussion. Plus, we got a new Jon Wilner article, and even Jon Wilner, for the first time, we've seen him, those survival odds, right? And I really like how he does this and how he frames it. I think from a content perspective, it's a very smart thing to do, to break down Pac-12 survival odds into a football line, right? He said that it's a 5.5 point favorite. Survival has been a 5.5 point favorite this whole time. I think that breaks it down and it makes it easier for people to relate to it, even like more casual fans who are not following realignment on a day in, day out basis like a lot of us are. He has now moved the survival odds. He has changed it. It's now a 5 point favorite. It's gone from a 5.5 point favorite to a 5 point favorite. And he says it will change now every week by half a point. So every week that we continue to go without a Pac-12 deal, now that we're in March, the line will move by half a point, which I think is fair. I think that's fair. And I honestly maybe a little bit cautious, because he said by the end of the month, if it gets there, then it'll only be a 3 point favorite, only a field goal favorite. I think if we get to the end of the month, it's going to be more like even odds, 50-50 on what exactly is going to happen there. But a lot can happen in the month. A lot can change. So we shall see. But we'll read you the latest updates there from Wilner. I didn't actually have a chance to check Canzano this time around. But that's the basis of what we're going to talk about. If we have some time, I mean, some more fun topics. If you've been paying attention to the Big 12 press releases that have come out lately, the Big 12 tournament is trying to get younger, hipper, and cooler, just like Brett Yormark said this league was going to do. Jordan Sparks is going to perform the national anthem. Shaquille O'Neal DJ Diesel, aka, is going to be performing a DJ set on Saturday night at the Big 12 tournament. And I missed the headliner here. Grammy-nominated hip-hop legend. That's how it's framed here in this story. Hip-hop legend Fat Joe will perform Friday night at the Big 12 championship. So Brett Yormark, he is flexing those music industry connections there, and that's cool, man. I like it. I dig it. I dig it. Make the tournament more exciting. I'm frankly excited for Brett Yormark to see what the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City is like. I don't know if that's actually going to change anything, but I feel like in his mind, he's probably aiming to move this tournament at some point, and probably to New York, probably try and get it to like a Madison Square Garden or something like that. And that is one of the few things that I would not like if it were going to happen, because I look, I'm a Kansas City and I was raised here, and I understand how special it is and how cool it is here. It's also a massive built-in advantage for Kansas every single year. So I don't know, maybe there's a part of it that would be good if it does get moved. But it's so awesome in Kansas City, man. It's so well attended. You're not going to get better attendance anywhere else, I don't think. So that'd be a part of it. But anyway, I digress. Maybe that'll change Brett Yormark's mind when he sees how cool it is here in KC. We shall see. That's basically what I have for you guys here on the show tonight. As you know, you guys that are already here, that have been here, you can get on the show tonight, control the content, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you get in. It'll pin your comment up at the top for me, pin it above everything else in the chat, ensures that it gets read. So that is a way for you to let your voice be heard, help control and dictate the content that's happening on the live chat tonight. And it is a way to support the work that I'm doing on this channel, bringing you Big 12 content on a week in, week out basis. It is much appreciated. I could not do it without your support. And I sincerely thank all of you who not only donate, but those of you who are just here to hang out, watch the video, and take part in this Big 12 community. I appreciate you all. Please like the video if you have not. That is a free way to support this channel and this Big 12 community. Is just one click. Just go over and like the video. That is all that it takes. If you're catching this after the fact, make sure and leave a comment as well, whether you love me, hate me, agree, disagree. I just had a gentleman that I was reading. Every time I log on, I never read the comments, but when I first log on, it'll pop up with my notifications. So I'll see like the first 2 or 3. So if you ever get responded to in one of the actual comments on the video, it's because yours happened to be one of the 2 or 3 that popped up at the moment that I opened this up, like ready to go live or ready to check something within my account. Just had a gentleman telling me these videos should only be 5 minutes long because you don't really have that much information. I'm unsubscribing. And I thought, well, seems to be working for 15,000 plus other people and for a multitude of other reasons, including understanding of the content game here, sir, but fair enough. So even if you are that gentleman and you want to tell me that you're unsubscribing and what, leave it in the comment. I appreciate it. Helps with the YouTube algorithm. All of that is great. Like the video, leave comments. Make sure you're subscribed. Click the bell so you know when it is that I'm going live. You can also contribute on Venmo, John-Kurtz-4. That is another way to support the channel there. All right. I think that's pretty much it. And we're going to be off and running here with the show today. I thank you for the compliment. Who was it that complimented the DZ Low 785? Yeah, thank you for the compliment on the lavender here. I actually forgot that I was wearing this. I've been wearing this today at work and then on the podcast. I honestly, I try not to show up in like K-State gear every single day because I understand, like, if I'm a fan of a rival school or something, like I'm Oklahoma, who just got the brakes beat off of them by K-State last night in Bramlage and Manhattan, I would not, even if I'm a fan of the content, I wouldn't be a huge fan of like having to come on and see like, all the K-State garb everywhere, right? I try to keep it pretty neutral for you here, but I forgot. I'll just be honest. I forgot today. Didn't realize it until I popped on and saw myself wearing this. Anyway, Andre, thank you for the donation, my friend. I appreciate it very, very much so. I don't see a comment here from you, Andre, so I'm just going to pretend that that you said I'm awesome and you agree with every single thing I've ever said. So I appreciate that, Andre, my guy. Thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for chipping in there. I appreciate it. Again, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something in order to donate and let your voice be heard. All right, so on the Pac-12 situation, here is what we got from the Sports Business Journal podcast. Laughing at Jeremy. Like the video and leave a comment. I never read the comments. Yeah, hey, I don't, but you can, other people do. That's a way to get a discussion going in the comments. I don't read them, by the way, Jeremy. I just don't leave them, or don't read them rather, because I just get mad. Like, people are dumb. Like, a lot of the comments are things that, well, maybe not a lot of them, but I see enough of them where I'm just like, I don't always have the self control to stay out of it. I mean, you guys see me on Twitter, right? Anyway, Sports Business Journal podcast. Sports Business Journal podcast. I listened to the Sports Business Journal podcast blurb about the Pac-12. A couple minutes that they spent on it this week. I mean, again, I think it was the second week in a row, or at least the second time in the span of a month, they do a who's up, who's down kind of thing. And who's down was George Kliavkov in the Pac-12 from one of them once again. And the quote there was, they've lost the narrative. Maybe they do have some kind of secret deal that makes it seem great, but it doesn't seem that way. So it was about losing the narrative. It was about really two things that they kind of hammered on the Pac-12 for, or at least that they explained. Hammered is probably not fair, because these are guys that are not biased. They don't care. Marshawn works for the New York Post. I mean, you think he really cares about the Pac-12 versus the Big 12? He doesn't. But there are points here where that one, they've lost this public narrative, and that is not helping, because they outline here, like, theoretically, if you're going on the normal timeline of a TV negotiation, particularly with an entity like Apple that is, in their words, persnickety and takes a long time to negotiate with, you are forcing yourself to expedite that process, because you can't afford to take this any longer with rumors swirling and people starting to freak out in the world we live in and the news cycle. Like, you've kind of lost a lot of your leverage because of that. So that there are a lot of problems for the Pac-12 simply because they've let that narrative spin out of control, that they're in trouble. There's no money out there. There are no good partners out there. They said, hey, that statement of unity, everybody could see right through that. It came across as like the athletic director giving a vote of confidence to the coach. Like, everybody understands what that meant, and that it was not really a great thing. You've now got athletic directors like the guy at Arizona State, Ray Anderson. I'm blanking on his name for sure, but he has publicly given voice to, yeah, there are some frustrations internally, even if I think things are going to work out. You're starting to see some of that all over the place, and that is not helping. The other thing they said is, and I think it was even Kurt Schultz, the former president of K-State, now the president of Washington State, who commented recently in that article from Jon Wilner, where they kind of set like the mid-March deadline. And even Wilner has kind of been positioning that like mid-March is the timeline where they really need to get things done. That's a point they made there, and said, hey, like, putting that timeline on it is not helping either, because when it comes to narratives, if you put your own timeline on something and then you miss that deadline, you miss that timeline, well, now you have applied a negative news cycle here. You know, people are going to be like, man, it's March 20th. We're past mid-March. We're getting to late March, and you still don't have this. You guys said you would. What is going on here? Something's wrong, when really it could just be that it's taking extra time to negotiate what would typically be a more normal sort of a deal. But I think the most interesting quotes, and what is in the headline, the title of the video today, is the fact that they said, quote, they really do have months if all of the colleges stick there, but we're both sensing that there could be one that leaves. And once one leaves, then all hell breaks loose. And it's of note for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, I think logically, all of that makes a lot of sense, right? If it is kind of a normal timeline, you would have a lot longer. Like, the TV deal is not up tomorrow. They don't need a deal to have their games broadcast this season. Like, they've got another year conceivably to figure it out, but you don't if somebody decides to leave, and then it totally turns into a panic situation. So you've got to be able to prevent that one school from leaving. But also, them saying like, hey, we're both sensing that there could be one that leaves. That is them saying sensing. It's not like that. To me, that doesn't mean sourced. That doesn't mean a sourced information, like bit of information has come through saying like, hey, I think someone could leave. But from what they're hearing about everything else, that is the sense that they pick up. And I don't know, there haven't been a lot of the other places that have even written about the precarious situation the Pac-12 is in that have gone that far to say like, hey, the sense is that somebody's going to leave. Somebody's going to jump. So now that comes down to, validity. Who do you really believe? How much faith do you put in these guys from the Sports Business Journal versus anybody else? But that was noteworthy to me to see it put that way, a little bit more strongly than we've seen in other places where it's been more like, hey, it is possible somebody could leave. This is now, we are sensing that there could be one that leaves. But I think all of us can kind of pick up that sense in one form or another, right? And to be honest, one of the most damning parts about this whole thing that would lead you to believe there's a sense that one could be gone is that statement of unity that the Pac 12 put out. Like, if everyone was fine and no one was truly going to leave and nobody thought that at all, period, like, why would you ever release the statement, right? Like, you really only, it's kind of a catch-22 with those statements. You're only releasing the statement if there really is a possibility that something could happen and somebody could leave. So, damned if you do, damned if you don't, I guess, on the statement, but I would have certainly passed on that if I were the Pac 12. Another quote here. This was about the deadline. I guess I should have just given you the specific quote on this. The deadline says, quote, here's what's not helping is setting the deadline. It was what, mid-March? Here's what's not helping is putting out that statement that, oh, everybody is in support. All of that is creating this frenzy and fervor. There have been some grenades, as George Kliavkov would say, that have been lobbed from other places, other folks in all of this. The Pac-12 has also blown itself up a few times too. Let me tell you a little story. Back when I was in middle school, I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but the original Halo game came out on Xbox, and it was like all the rage. That was what all the kids were playing. And I was a sports video game guy. I definitely played a lot of video games, and there were a handful of non-sports games that I would play. Shout out to Crash Bandicoot and GoldenEye. But I didn't get into a lot of that. And I wasn't particularly great at GoldenEye. Any kind of like first-person shooter game, not really my bag. But I wanted to hang out with my friends, and my friends would have these Halo parties, like a LAN party, right? Where you'd connect two Xboxes, like 8 people play. Anyway, point being, one time I can remember playing a game that lasted like 3 hours, and dudes were racking up kills in like the hundreds. I had -2 because twice I was up against a wall and didn't realize it and accidentally threw a grenade that then exploded on me and killed me. And the Pac-12 is doing some of that, right? The SEC and the Big Ten are racking up hundreds of kills, wandering around with all sorts of great weaponry and just slaughtering people. Meanwhile, the Pac-12 is kind of standing in the corner, bouncing grenades off a wall that are dangerously close to them. There's definitely been some of that, and that is what the Sports Business Journal is pointing out here. And I am glad, after the embarrassment that night was for me personally in like 7th grade, I am glad that it at least has netted me something here, and that is a story to tell in this YouTube live stream all these years later. That was probably like 2005. I will say like 17 to 18 years later. Sure glad that can happen. A lot of debate from the Sports Business Journal guys on whether or not this negotiation, they started by saying like, hey, it might be in only the second quarter. At one point, they were like, maybe it's like the third quarter. And then it was almost like a consensus at the end, like, hey, because of the urgency of having to keep a school from leaving, it's really more like in the fourth quarter. And that's really what I feel like. I mean, if we're at the point now where Jon Wilner is actually adjusting those survival odds, which have stayed the same throughout a lot of bad news cycles for the Pac-12 here recently, I would say that means we're getting to the fourth quarter on this deal, and you're going to need to have something on the table, even if it's just privately and it's not public at this point. You're going to need something here to get people going. I will get you the details from the Jon Wilner article, why he has moved the survival odds, what he is saying about TV partners and where everything is at right now, because it was a pretty comprehensive read put together by Wilner this time around. But before I do that, I will remind you, in order to make your voice heard, weigh in with a question or comment tonight, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you do that. It not only lets your voice be heard, guarantees that your comment gets read on the chat, but also it is a way to support the channel and the work that I'm doing to bring you Big 12 content week in, week out. R-Web, what's up, R-Web? Appreciate you being here, my friend, as always. R-Web says, Georgie kicking butt and shopping. That was one of the frustrating moments this week. The Pac-12 propaganda machine seems to at least be humbled a little bit here and backing off a little bit here from the pretty cocky, almost mocking of Big 12 Twitter position that they were in a couple of months ago. However, there was still a tweet this week from Jon Wilner in response to Baylor Athletic Director Mack Rhoades making public comments about the Pac-12 And Wilner, I'm paraphrasing here, but Wilner said something to the effect of, wow, we have active athletic directors publicly commenting about the demise of another conference. What a time to be alive. And I simply just hit it with the quote tweet of that quote about shopping that George Kliavkoff had at a press conference, a conference commissioner at a press conference talking about the Big 12, saying, we're not sure if we're going shopping there or not. Same thing. Like that's, if you guys have been watching, my whole point on this has been like both sides are doing the same thing here, taking information, slanting it the way that they want to see it. Frustrating part has been the Pac-12 and the journalists and the, high and mighty academia world of the Pac-12. Like they think they're above the Big 12 when no, everybody's just been doing the same thing. And it's the same deal here. We're in a different world. People comment about this publicly. There is not the same decorum that there used to be about all of this. And it is a kill or be killed situation. Florida State, God, I don't remember if it was the board of someone had the president of the board of directors, the chancellor at the university, but someone had the quote of like, we got to look out for Florida State. We don't care about the ACC. We've got to look out for Florida State. Like these things are being said more publicly, much more so now than they ever used to be. So we're just living in a different world. And yeah, people are going to comment about that. It's not only just how the circumstances have changed in realignment, it's how our world has changed and how our news cycles have changed. And all of these different things play a factor in that. This Twitter world that we live in, where everybody's kind of fighting back and forth all the time and spinning things all the time. Yeah, you're just going to get that. It's not news. That's not new at all. We've been in this world. And George Kliavkoff, the commissioner, has come out and said ridiculous things on multiple occasions and does not seem to like, it's not like Kliavkoff is some stoic character who stays above the fray and like morally superior character who has stayed above the fray this whole time. That's not it at all. He's just losing. He's just not good at it. Like that's the reality of the situation. So that is why we are where we are. So anyway, R-Web, I appreciate you reminding me about that little exchange and interaction from earlier today. R-Web says the Sports Business Journal, total 50%ers, Jay Clownzano, LOL. A reference there to John Canzano, who pointed, he is the one that quoted a consultant that said 50% of what you read out there that is reported is inaccurate. So that is definitely the 50%ers. That's a pretty good, we were talking about like truck stop conference. And I was trying to say like, is this the Buc-ee's 12? Is it the Flying J conference? What are we doing with this? Calling the supporters of this channel 50%ers actually is a pretty damn good idea, R-Web. Would anybody out there buy like a 50%er t-shirt? We started doing some 50%er t-shirts for the channel. That's not a bad idea. That one may stick. Some 50%ers around here. I like it. I like it a lot. Thank you, R-Web. R-Web, you'll get a free 50%er shirt if and when that happens. Wolf 58. What's up, Wolf 58? Thank you for being here, my friend. Appreciate you. Great to talk with you as always. Wolf 58 says, I get the realities and economics of today's college football, Big 12, Pac-12, or ACC. It doesn't feel good to see a neighbor's house burn down, but that's just me. Well, all right. I think totally fair point. First of all, I respect that opinion a lot. There are a couple of things that I would point out here. Wolf 58, and again, correct me if I'm wrong. My recollection is that, and the logo, your picture, would indicate this as well. Ohio State fan, if you're in the position where your school is locked in, secured, not having to worry about anything, I can completely understand. Well, some people would go to the total nth degree of like, oh, more, superiority here. Who cares if everything else is burning down? I think for a decent amount of rational people, it would kind of be like that. Like, oh, this sucks. Like, I've got a secure place. Now I got to watch this game and this sport kind of crumble around me with a lot of very deserving fan bases suffering because of all this stuff and money and greed and all that. I think it's a little easier to not get sucked into the pettiness of it when your school is assured success long-term in all of this. And what's happened with the Big 12 is like, I won't even try to claim that we are some moral high ground around here. But again, it's just like everybody's dragged into this fight the same way. Like, the Big 12 is left for dead. A lot of people were laughing. A lot of people were being flippant, maybe more so than laughing, just being very flippant about the Big 12's survivability and the fan bases within the conference. And like, if you're going to act like that, and a lot of people from out west were, the conference as a whole kind of was, in turning its eye, even like adding Big 12 teams and expansion. I mean, I think the perception there was the Pac-12 felt like they were too good for that, didn't need to do that. When that happens and you're being drugged through the mud, Stuart Mandel, who we all perceive to be kind of a Pac-12 homer, leaning that way a little bit, being a West Coast guy, writes that story about TV numbers. And then Sam Bradshaw from Sikkim 365 does a great job of outlining why those are very, very misleading, and we never get a correction and the story stays pinned. Like, all these things build up resentment. Even if it's not like every specific fan, it's a generalization for all Pac-12 fans and Pac-12 schools and all that. But that does develop some real animosity there. And then when you come back around on the other side and suddenly the shoe's on the other foot, like, it is very hard not to get sucked into that, especially when the Pac-12's demise can therefore be good to you. So I agree with you. It sucks that the game is in this state. It really does. Like, if I stop to think about it too long, I try not to, honestly, because if I start to sit down and like think about the state of the game of college football, where it's going, it's very depressing. It sucks. I very much wish that things could, even as much as I support NIL and the players getting paid and being able to transfer and all these different things that have happened that have changed the game, I'm happy for the players there. But I am nostalgic for what it was like when the Big 12 was still a thing, and I grew up with that. Even the Big 8, like all that, and it was still regionalized and we did things the old way. I would change it in a second if I could, but we can't. And so I try just not to live too much in that world, because it'll be depressing if I do. So I've tried to just adapt to the new world, my new circumstances, what it means for my school, the conference that I love and support, and go from there. But I completely respect where you're coming from. I mean, I think it's a totally valid point. And if I were above the fray, like just a good person that could compartmentalize these things and tuck that away and not let the emotions of how much I care about all this get in the way, I would probably be right there with you and sharing all those same opinions. I also think I would be more apt to share all those opinions if my school was a powerhouse that had a secure place. So anyway, just some thoughts there. But totally understand where you're coming from on that, Wolf 58. McMuffin, what's up, McMuffin? Appreciate you being here as always. McMuffin says Texas is fourth now in the Big 12. They're an average team in the conference again. Order is restored. Yeah, I will be very closely monitoring what happens on Saturday with both Baylor and Texas, because that affects whether or not K-State will get the 2, the 3, or the 4 seed in Kansas City. And I would very much like to avoid the 4 seed. I don't want any part of seeing a healthy TCU all of a sudden in Kansas City. And then that draw would be healthy TCU. And then, oh, by the way, if you win that, have fun taking on Kansas and Sprint Center in the semis. I don't really love any part about that path. But yeah, and Texas, I mean, look, as much as we rip on them, and I don't have as much hatred for Texas basketball as I do football, but I certainly don't like them. They've still, like, considering everything that's happened there, I have a hard time crushing them too much. And I do kind of like Rodney Terry. I would feel good for him if he got the job. Texas is probably a little bit overrated in my humble opinion. But then again, I mean, I don't know. They came into K-State's gym and they were the only team to win there all year when they were down by 14. So they've had some nice performances. But anyway, yes, I'm glad that Baylor won. I'm glad that Baylor beat them recently. Am I making that up? I'm glad that TCU won yesterday. Let me see. McMuffin is a Baylor fan. Thus why I say that. Yeah, it was right before that, Baylor. That's right. Okay. It's been Baylor and TCU back to back. That's right. Okay. So we have that established. Yes, Texas now fourth in the Big 12. Would love to see them finish there. Michael, what's up, Michael? Appreciate you, Michael. Michael says, condolences to Kurtz's Halo Abby. Paid you $2. There we go. Thanks, Michael. Thank you. You've put a monetary value to that. I got destroyed in Halo once upon a time, just so that I could make $2 on the back of that 20 years later. I appreciate that sincerely, Michael. Man, I don't know that I have any other like great video game stories for you other than I was a good NCAA player back in my day. And when that game comes back out, that will be the thing. I mean, I can already tell you it will happen. That will be the thing to get me to buy a new gaming console for the first time in like at least half a decade. It's been a while. I've still got an Xbox One, but like it's been a while since I bought that thing. So NCAA football coming back will get me out. It will get me out. Rob, what's up, Rob? Rob, I appreciate you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the donation, my friend. Rob says Florida State was in the first college football playoff. Since then, 3 seasons with a winning record in the conference. They have won Elite Eight in 30 years. Not sure they need to complain. Well, so that is an interesting part of this, right? Like the dynamic with Florida State, and we can start to venture into some of this. Florida State and Clemson's athletic director, like they both, the ADs there have both come out recently speaking about their desire for unequal revenue sharing in the ACC and their general alarm with where this is headed, with the ACC poised to be like $30 to $40 million per year behind the SEC and Big Ten as they move through this TV contract that they are locked up in. In fact, like the SEC will go to market again as of right now before this ACC one is even done. So think about what that could be, 7-8 years from now, the SEC going through a new TV deal, how much more money that's going to be than what the ACC is making. So I get where they're coming from and their sense of alarm there. But the one that has been stronger of the two is Florida State. And if there's anybody that deserves to be completely throwing their weight around, certainly based on success, it has been Clemson. I mean, they've been single-handedly dragging the ACC along for the last decade, essentially, since Dabo really turned it on, slightly less than a decade. I think they've been to 5 or 6 college football playoffs at this point. They are the ones that would have the most right to complain. Florida State, frankly, by being a big-time power that is down, has really, really hurt the conference. But I do still think like their brand has a lot of residual value. It is still a draw, and they still are, kind of like how we feel about Texas around here, right? Like hate them. They certainly don't on merit. If this is a meritocracy, they certainly don't deserve to be the big wig that gets to go to the SEC and command all the attention, but their brand does do a lot of talking. I still think Florida State has that. And so that is why they're in this position to be able to complain. My perception of Florida State has always been just a little bit mismanaged. Their facilities, as I understand it, are not great for football, especially considering the success that they've had. So they haven't always done the best job themselves of helping themselves. But I do feel like, they're getting close to turning the corner here with football right now. I think they had a 9-win season last year with Norvell, and a lot of people are going to be really high on them for being like a top 10 to 15 team this year. So they may be getting back. And regardless, they are one of the big brands there. And just the general, we've seen how our friends from Orlando around here act, right? Like the general tone of fans from the state of Florida, it can be very aggressive, right? Florida strikes me as a very aggressive state. How many Florida man stories do you read throughout the year? I am not shocked by their aggressiveness here. So I will dive into that. I promise a little bit more with the updates from the articles on Florida State in just a moment. But first, I want to get to Julius's donation here. Julius, appreciate you, my friend. As always, thank you for being here and being so generous every single time you are. Truly appreciate it. Julius says, howdy, John. It's been a minute since I've seen a live show. Thanks for your hard work. The only thing I have to say is go Cougs. There you go, Julius. Go Cougs. I will say it proudly with you, and I will say it proudly with you, acknowledging the fact that I got off a nice little zinger at the expense of Utah. If you saw that on Twitter yesterday, the Mountain West tweeted, big news coming with like the eyeballs, and I said, congratulations to Utah. Feel great for them. They deserve it. And Utah fans did not take kindly to that. I got to stop reading the replies when Utah fans get after it, because I had somebody that got, I'm not gonna lie, they got at me a little bit, and I popped off back at them. I need to just let those things stand on their own, right? Because like Utah, come on, man, come on. And judging by just a little bit that I picked up, it seems like Utah is finally, like everybody in the Pac-12 seems to be picking up some little sense of like unease right now. I'm getting a little bit of that from Utah fans out there. All right. So, when you're ready to come around and say that we were right, Utah, and grovel at the feet of anybody that could preserve your right to go lose the Rose Bowl every single year, you just let me know. I'll give you guys a forum. You're more than welcome here on this channel to come back and grovel at the feet of Big 12 Twitter, of this truck stop conference, of the 50 percenters. All right. You are welcome to do that at any time, Utah fans. This door is wide open. wide open. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Anyway, Julius, appreciate you. Thank you for your support. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Go Cougs, and thanks for being here, my friend. I think we're almost caught up on donations. Here we go. Rise and Shout. That's who I was looking for. Rise and Shout. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the support. Rise and Shout. Rise and Shout says 23 basketball schedule idea. If you play the school in football, one game at the opposite location. So rival plus teams with no football game, home and home, total 18 games. That's interesting. So you're basically like ensuring you'll get a game against somebody every year. Like you would not go a single year missing a school in football and basketball, as I'm understanding it is that idea. I actually do kind of like that. I don't know how feasible that is in terms of like making all the schedules mesh and really work, and if that would be plausible or like possible to legitimately pull off. But I like that as a concept. I do, for all these schools, because it'll get tricky with scheduling, and it'll be disappointing, and sometimes you're gonna have schools gaining an advantage because of who they're playing, and all that stuff is going to be in play here. But if you could do that and ensure that you're playing every single team every year to at least give you like some sense of a little rivalry with everybody, because it takes games, it takes firing off at each other on Twitter. I've seen the K-State Iowa State rivalry take off simply because of playing games every year and then tweeting about it before and after the game. That's what you have to like really truly develop rivalries here. So I think there is some legitimacy to like, hey, that can help plant some deeper seeds in some of these rivalries here. And let me read you a quote. I had this jotted down in my notes. Guy that has taken over as the president of content now at ESPN, Burke Magnus, he said this 6 months ago. He said, quote, "The amount of time we spend thinking about market size, it pales in comparison to the amount of time we think about rivalries. In college sports, it's the rivalries, it's the traditions, it's the brands that really aggregate audience." So on that note, can you start to develop more of those deep-seated rivalries if you're playing each other more often? The answer is yes. That's how you do it. So I don't think that's totally devoid of logic or a good point there. I think that's good. I like it a lot. All right, here's the Wilner article before we leave the Pac-12 for the night. Wilner says, for several months, this is big news, people, big news. Says, for several months, we viewed Pac-12 survival as a 5.5-point favorite over Pac-12 extinction, which equated to a probability of about 67%. The conference had a 2-3 chance to successfully navigate this existential crisis. Commissioner George Kliavkoff's decision to take the negotiations across the holidays and into a second calendar year has created an additional level of uncertainty. As a result, our Pac-12 survival odds have changed for the first time in months, ticking down to 5 points. And they will continue to decrease by a half point every week that comes and goes without a deal. If the end of March arrives and the same state of uncertainty still exists, then survival will be favored over extinction by merely a field goal. So it is official. Pac-12 survival has gone from a 5.5-point favorite to a 5-point favorite and will continue to go down by half a point every single week. I truly don't say that to mock it. Because like I said, I think it's a good idea. I think it's a smart idea in terms of just creating more engaging content for everybody, to put it in terms that everybody can understand like that. And it is a public acknowledgement from even someone who's getting all of his information from very pro Pac-12 sources that yes, it's a very tenuous time right now for the Pac-12. And these are the kinds of things for the satisfaction and the sanity of a lot of us, right? We've kind of wanted to see, right? Just some public admissions of what seems to be clear and obvious, but for a long time was sort of being denied by that corner of the world. So we shall see. I would actually, and again, the part that I would disagree on, I think it becomes more like a 50-50, just a pick 'em if you get to April and there's still no TV deal on the table here for the Pac-12. And who knows the twists and turns it could take between now and then, the amount of negative press that could come out about the Pac-12 between now and then, because it seems like right now you could just set your watch to that. A little bit more from Wilner here. It says the media valuation. We project the Pac-12's valuation to fall within 10% of the Big 12's agreement with ESPN and Fox, which will pay each school an average of $31.7 million annually. That places the Pac-12's range as $28.5 million per school on the low end and $34.9 million annually on the high end. Our target number is $29.7 million. So now the target number from Wilner has changed to $29.7 million. Our web, shout out again to R Web, dug up the other day for me when we were talking about gaslighting on Twitter. The fact that at one point there was a clip that was like, I think it was between 33 and 38. It was something like that was the projection from Jon Wilner not all that long ago. So now we're down to 29.7. That's a fairly significant drop. Now, is 29.7 significantly lower than 31.7 of the Big 12? No, it's really not. But if George Kliavkoff was going around promising people $40 million a year, that's a pretty stark difference and a pretty big disappointment for most of the people around there. 29.7, I think, is a number that, like, you get to that number, assuming that at least there are some of these games on ESPN and it's not like 100% streaming or like 90% streaming, something like that. That's probably going to be enough to put a Band-Aid on the league. I do think that would be enough to put a Band-Aid on the league, and they'd be okay at least for a little while. A little bit more from Wilner here on how he arrives at that number. He says the midpoint of our October estimates were $37.5 million for the Pac-12 and $40 million for the Big 12. Put another way, we valued the former at 94% of the latter. So what he's doing here is taking 94% then of the Big 12's 31.7 would be 29.7. So that's how he got to that conclusion. But still, some of this is a little bit frustrating to me to see this, like, framing it as, hey, at one point in time, the midpoints of our October estimates were $37.5 million for the Pac-12 and $40 million for the Big 12. And then there was more literature about the Big 12 set the floor by taking the deal that they did. And it's like, no, the Pac-12 was just really never actually worth anywhere near $40 million a year. And George Kliavkoff had you guys all gassed up on this. I don't think the Big 12 took a deal that was that far below market value. I think, if anything, maybe very slightly. I don't think that much. And then clearly the trade-off has been worth it in spades for the stability of everything. So I still get annoyed with that, where it's like this slowly backtracking off your position instead of just admitting the whole time that you're pretty high on the supply that George Kliavkoff was dishing out there, right? George Kliavkoff may have the joint fund. Maybe I don't remember who that BYU fan was that I just roasted the other day, saying he was contributing to not a BYU fan, Utah fan. The other day he was contributing to the joint fund, but apparently Kliavkoff's got some of that too, and he had all these guys pretty high up on it, and now they're backing off. As far as where this deal is going to wind up, distribution-wise, here's what Wilner has to say. He says, piecing together the crumbs, we believe ESPN, Apple, and Amazon are keenly interested in the content, which now that's interesting, saying keenly interested in the content, because it was pretty much the opposite what the Sports Business Journal said in their podcast, where they said everybody seems to be kind of like backing off in terms of their interest in the Pac-12 right now, or just cooling a little bit for the time being. That doesn't seem like keenly interested, but that's kind of the difference in framing right now. Everybody is telling a very, very similar story, but framed here, these guys are keenly interested, whereas, that's inside the Pac-12. Outside the Pac-12, it's more like they have some suitors, but everybody seems to be cooling on it right now. Wilner says, we also believe the Pac-12's ability to fill the 7:30 p.m. Pacific window is a valuable asset, and not just on Saturday night. Yeah, we know that. In theory, the conference could fill that window every Friday and Saturday night for 13 weeks. Amazon makes the most sense for the Friday game because it could promote the broadcast during Thursday Night Football, while ESPN makes the most sense for the Saturday night game. So what you'd have there is basically keeping in place the Saturday night slot that ESPN has had right now, and then you would squeeze in a Friday night game on Amazon. I mean, that doesn't seem like, at least for those games, that doesn't seem like a terrible plan necessarily. The issue there will then be like, where are the rest of the games? If it's one game on ESPN and then 75% of the rest of the stuff is streaming only, you're still going to run into tons of distribution problems. Not even Oregon and Washington, they're not going to have their game in primetime every single week. You will have some issues there. A little bit more here. We should also point out that it's difficult for fans in other regions to grasp how entrenched Apple and Amazon are in the culture and economics of the West Coast. Okay, presidents and stuff living, someone's office is 14 miles from Apple's headquarters in Cupertino. Our sense is that presidents, now this is interesting. Our sense is that presidents don't look at the streaming giants with the weariness that might exist in other conferences. They would view partnerships as enhancing deeper connections than mere broadcast agreements. So the idea there being, we are getting further into bed with these entities that are very valuable, that we kind of know and are surrounded by and trust more than the rest of the world. And if you want to make the argument, hey, like long-term potential there, like I can see a little bit of validity to that. Like in 10 years, if you were the first to really get in bed with Apple and Amazon and streaming continues to trend that way and more people are cutting the cord and over the air cable becomes less and less important, there might be something to that. But again, this sort of comes back to the original thing we were talking about. Like you would conceivably have more time for this TV deal. However, you have shortened the gap of that because of the sense of urgency that is there and needing to keep a school from leaving, keeping everybody in place right now. It's like the same deal here. Like conceivably, yes, that would be true, but you can't if it's going to be too much of a sacrifice in the short term, you won't even survive to the point where that matters. You won't survive to the point where streaming totally takes over and your relationships here matter because you'll have schools leaving and then the conference is just going to fold. So that would be my response to it if that's how the pencil pushers, so to speak, in the league actually feel. It says our sense is the presidents don't look at streaming giants with a wariness. That said, the conference needs its best football games on linear platforms in order to maximize reach to mainstream fans. As a result, the hotline expects a media deal with ESPN and either Apple or Amazon, and we wouldn't rule out the possibility for both companies to be involved. Multiple sources believe the Pac-12 is considering 3 options for membership. He basically 50% chance 2 schools get added, 45% no schools get added, 5% chance 4 schools get added. There are not 4 good enough options out there to really be expanding by 4. So I'm with him on that. I don't think there's any chance that would be happening. And it does feel, I would say it feels probably more like 70-30 that expansion is coming if they can get a deal done. That's the problem with those odds there. Like, I think if the league survives, it's going to have to expand. But the 30% would come in like, will somebody leave? Will the league actually survive to get to that point? That's kind of how I view it. So there's your Jon Wilner update on what's going on in Pac-12 country. Click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. If you want to weigh in, make your voice heard. When you do that, your question pops up above everything else, guarantees that it gets read, and is a way to support the channel here and the fact that I bring you Big 12 content on a weekly basis. And it is much, much appreciated. I could not do it truly without the support of all of you guys. Jamie, what's up, Jamie? Jamie, appreciate you. Jamie says the funniest thing is how the Pac-12 schools like Utah think they are so great and above the Big 12 and even on par with the SEC Big 10. I'm going to laugh when I watch their games at the pump on GSTV, hashtag Woo Pig Suey. The gas station memes have been pretty funny. Like everybody that has photoshopped like a Washington State, Oregon game onto the TV screen at the little gas pump. That is quite funny. There have been the jokes made about Twitch. I've seen the jokes made about like a Pac-12 OnlyFans, which is very funny. Whoever did that, that was good. That was good. So I'm here for the jokes. I'm definitely here for the jokes. We can be here for that, right? You know, like I know there was the comment earlier, Wolf 58, which again, I respect and totally get. Like, hey, I'm not really going to rejoice and celebrate over someone else's house burning down, but we can do a little laughing, right? We can poke some fun at things. There have been plenty of jokes made at the Big 12's expense over the years. So I've got no problem with it coming there at the Pac-12's expense, certainly. All right. From Jamie to Rob. What's up, Rob? Rob, appreciate you checking in again, my friend. Rob says, again, watch for whatever deal the Pac-12 signs, including the Pac-12 paying for all production. That's $5 to $7 million a year per school. They will be at $24 million per. There has been talk about that, and somebody did DM me at one point an article that I took a peek at that was about like how that's gone with the MLS, that they had a lot of production costs along the same lines. And the devil can be in the details there, Rob. You are right in that if that is going to be a problem here and that's going to be a thing that each school would have to be paying that would be if Kliavkov is smart and if he's going to try and market this thing the right way, that's how you would want to release it. You'd release the information that, oh, we signed this deal that's going to be $33 million per school, and then just leave it way down below in the fine print that, oh yeah, these production costs will actually whack off about $5 or $6 million there. So that won't be the true number. But no, the headline is going to be like what the true raw number is, not what the net number is. You would list the gross number, not the net number, to get those headlines. And hey, we're above the Big 12. But really, this is going to be less than it because we have all these production costs and stuff. So if you're going to market it the right way, if you're going to be Brett Yormark, be in that vein, that is certainly how you would do it. Certainly how you would do it. Steven, what's up, Steven? Appreciate you being here. Thank you for your support of the channel, my friend. Much, much, much appreciated. Steven says, I don't know if you listen to the Monty Show on YouTube, but they have said the deal is $25 million per school. And Pac-12 commissioner is now trying to sign the grant of rights on that deal. I don't listen to the Monty Show. I just know, like, I've had people come tweet me and say things about what their sources are saying and all that. I'll just kind of repeat what I've always said. Like, I don't try to be sources guy, and I have all these sources telling me these different things, and here's what you would expect. There's just so much of that with realignment. 90% of it is wrong. There we go. 90%ers stand up. But 90% of the stuff that's been like assuredly reported by people in that same vein has not wound up being true and accurate. Reading the latest Wilner article, I didn't read it to you, but one of the things he said was like, this is so tight-lipped. Nobody really knows what's going on. It is a very select few people that do, and nobody's really talking about the actual nuts and bolts of the details here. So I would be skeptical. I would be skeptical. I mean, that seems in line, like that. If you wanted to drum up like what a contract would potentially look like right now for the Pac-12, $25 million per school seems about right in terms of what the expectation would be right now. So I'm not even totally saying that it's wrong. I take it with a grain of salt. I definitely take it with a grain of salt. And my encouragement to you would be, if you're entertained by these channels and the people that say that, and like, we talk about MHV3R on Twitter, and a lot of people call it basically like realignment fan fiction, which I think there is a little bit of truth to that, but it is very entertaining. I mean, I still follow the guy. I take it with a grain of salt, but I still read it. So I would like, if these shows are entertaining to you and you value the information or the entertainment aspect of it, whatever it is, sure, man, watch the hell out of it. Like, definitely do. I support any creator. Do your thing. But I would just say, like, use some caution and take it with a grain of salt if somebody is floating information like that and presenting it as like a fact of what is happening right now. That's what I would say. Oh boy, we got missing a handful of donations here. All right, Calico Willie, what's up, Calico Willie? Calico Willie says, hi, John. Best game I've seen in person at the Octagon last night. Like that quarter zip. Thank you. Thank you. Like I mentioned earlier, I try not to do this to you guys and like just shove the K-State stuff in your face all the time. I just kind of forgot I was wearing this today when I hopped on here, but it does look slick, boy. Lavender is a good color on me, if I do say so myself. Calico, I'm bummed that I didn't go last night. I could have gone, like I had physically a ticket to go if I wanted to. Would have just been like a get me in seat, but 7 o'clock on a weekday, it's really hard to do, especially when I had taken off work early for a couple of games earlier this year. So I didn't do it, but I regretted it because it was amazing. Like everything about that was amazing. The team going into Wabash with the fans at the end of the game, a la Tang, was amazing. There were so many damn highlights in that game. It was great. So I'm happy for you that you got to be there, Calico, because it was a hell of an experience. Even just watching it on TV, it was just a freaking blast to watch those guys. Michael, what's up, Michael? Michael says, can we get another 30-second rant on the Utes? I think I gave you like what I had earlier talking about the tweet. That tweet that I gave you should be good for a while, right? With the Mountain West thing there. That's just, I don't have anything real specific here. Somebody would have to challenge me to get me to go off. My tank is running on E a little bit here at the end of the show. So I'm sorry, Michael. I don't have anything like totally prepared for you right now. But who knows? In the next 10 minutes or so, which this is like your 5 to 10 minute warning here on the chat. If you have something, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something if you want to get it in. And I do need to get to that Florida State story a little bit too. But we'll see. We'll see what happens the rest of the way. Zornell, what's up, Zornell? Zornell Malone checking in. Appreciate you, my friend. Zornell says Pac-12 conference was dead when they didn't get the Pac-16 in 2010. And Texas got Longhorn TV. Yeah, the Longhorn Network. I mean, there was a great – who had that article? I was reading a piece this week that was outlining like, hey, the Pac-12 was on the precipice of this in 2010 of becoming this like power where they would have made the first major Titanic move and taken – it was Texas, Oklahoma, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State. And am I missing somebody else in there? It was going to be like that group going over to the Pac-12. And that would have been massive. It would have been monster had that happened. And that was when I was sitting there thinking K-State was going to be in the Big East. I definitely remember those days. And you're right. I mean, it's crazy how different of a path the Pac-12 would have traveled had they done that. And you had Texas and Oklahoma out in the Pac-12 instead of being there for the SEC to take. And what would the TV deal look like for the Pac-12? And how would that have changed? Would Larry Scott have still found a way to screw it up? I mean, there are a lot of fascinating avenues to explore if that were actually the case, if that would have changed. Michael, what's up? Michael says the Monty Show is the MHVER of SLC of Salt Lake City. Throw crap and pray. I mean, I don't want to like run down anybody's show at all. The idea of whether it's a radio show, YouTube, whatever, like the ultimate idea is be entertaining. That's what people want. They want entertaining. If the idea was to be completely right all the time about all your sports predictions and all that, everybody would fail. Everybody would fail because nobody's right all the time. Your job is to be engaging and interesting. Certainly informed too. And you can't be like throwing out a ton of information as fact and be wrong all the time and expect people to totally believe in your credibility and all that. But the ultimate goal is to be entertaining here. So it seems to be working. I know that they have a lot of followers here, but I would also be lying if I didn't say sometimes the channels and shows in that vein, it does feel like that. Just throwing a bunch of stuff out there. Some stuff is going to stick. You'll be able to claim some things were right. And there are ways to backtrack your way out of a point fairly easily. And unfortunately, we see it all the time these days instead of admitting you're wrong. So I get what you're saying there for sure. Cat fan in Huskerland, a.k.a. Daniel Osborne. What's up, Daniel? Daniel, appreciate you, my man. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. Greatly appreciate it. Daniel, another Cat fan, checking in here. He says, great show, John, and what a great win last night for the Cats. Love the polo. Thank you very much. Good old Pennant Willie, Flag Willie here. It was a great win for K-State. I think they're going to be a 2 seed in the upcoming NCAA tournament if they just win one of the next 2 or 3, whatever it's going to be games. I guess one of the next 2, because if you won one in KC, there would be another. But either win at West Virginia on Saturday or win that first game in the Big 12 tournament, I think you're definitely going to lock up a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, which is just incredible. We're talking about a team last or next to last in the Big 12. Each of the last 3 years only had 2 players returning from last year's roster. Lost Nigel Pack, who was the star from last year's roster, and now they're going to be a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. It is incredible. Great one to experience last night, Daniel, and glad you're here, my friend. Great time to be a Cat. Great time to be a Cat. Briefly on Florida State. I know I went into this a little bit, but I think the most, where is it at? Where's my bolded part? Here's the bombshell from the article that came from the Florida State on 3 site. Maybe bombshell is a little strong. But it says, over the weekend, I reached out to Florida State Board of Trustees Chair Peter Collins to see if he would shed any light on FSU's position, particularly about the grant of rights, since the topic was not raised in the open forum. This is what Collins said. He said, quote, "We have a very good handle on the grant of rights." Yeah, that's an interesting quote. Reached out to see if he would shed any light on FSU's position, and he said, "We have a very good handle on the grant of rights." That's the crux of this whole issue. How binding is that actually going to be? Theoretically, it's going to bind you to the conference basically until 2036. But there's been talk and scuttlebutt for a while now about maybe somebody will try to test this here at some point in time. And Florida State is certainly firing some warning shots right now. And whether you take it as a threat or just a warning is up for interpretation. I think that's really where we're at right now. Is this Florida State simply just trying to angle for unequal revenue sharing at this point in time and trying to basically leverage their way into that? Or are they really serious about this and ready for what could be like the real fight for their lives? Because that would be a hell of a battle in court if they're going to go to it. And the other part that's very complicated, it was pointed out in this ESPN article about Florida State. It says, as one athletic director pointed out, it would also require another conference to extend an invitation to join before knowing whether it would have the rights to broadcast that team's games. Because this grant of rights is all about who has the right to actually broadcast those games, who gets the money from it. They're saying it's a legal catch-22. And it is. It is. You'd have to feel pretty good as a conference about the lawyers and the work that they're going to do if you would actually extend that invite to allow Florida State to test this thing. But I will say one of the things that kind of dissuaded me a little bit here from thinking, Florida State is just doing it to try and throw their weight around and get unequal revenue sharing, is this blurb from the ESPN article. It said, even the most seismic shifts in distribution don't exactly paint the picture of a financial windfall for power programs like Clemson and Florida State. Estimates shared suggest a net shift of between $250,000 and $3 million annually. Pocket change, as one AD called it. That is so true. That is pocket change, man. That is not something significant. If the unequal revenue sharing here, the play for Florida State is to try and pick up an extra $3 million a year max. I mean, what is that doing? That's a tenth at best of the gap that you're trying to close with the SEC and the Big Ten. I don't know that that's ultimately going to be worth it. So if that is really the reality, I would start to lean more towards like this seems like a more legitimate threat from Florida State. The On3 author of this article had pointed out that like Florida State started talking about getting rid of Bobby Bowden at one point in time. He didn't think they would actually do it because of everything he meant to the program. But once he proved that he wasn't going to get him back on top, they ushered him out the door. They were not afraid to do that. He also pointed out that like with Willie Taggart, they were not afraid to make that move very quickly into his tenure and basically said like, hey, man, I wouldn't put it past them because they've been serious about moves like this before. Florida State, I think, carries a little bit too much bravado with this for my liking right now, just in that unless this is all about a strategic play, I would be much more concerned about how that grant of rights thing is going to work out in a legal battle and how expensive that could be. Plus, you're talking about writing a $120 million check just for the exit fees. I don't know. That made me a little uneasy as a Florida State fan, but I think in the end, I would just appreciate, hey, my school is fighting for me. My school is trying to do what's best for us, not the conference, and we have leverage here. We need to use it. So I think that's basically where Florida State is at right now. Lewis, what's up, Lewis? Lewis, I don't see a question or comment, but shout out to you, my friend. Appreciate you being here. Lewis Doe, thank you for the dough. Thank you for your donation, my friend. Really, really appreciate it. Bill G, what's up, Bill G? Bill G says, congratulations, KSU. Great win. Good luck in the NCAAs. Thank you, Bill. Thank you. It was a great win. Blast last night has been outlined. A lot of people are probably sick of hearing me say that here at this point. But I will tell you this, Bill. I'm in this position now where I'm like, Big 12 tournament is fun. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. But when you have a team that is really good and you feel like you have a chance to go deep in the NCAA tournament, I'm kind of just like, one, can we get the NCAA tournament here? And two, if you were to make a deep run in the Big 12 tournament, how much does that hurt you in terms of legs and everything in the NCAA tournament? It's just been a long time since I've had to stress and worry about those sorts of things. So I'm kind of like, hey, I want to win the Big 12 tournament. It'd be really fun. And I don't like want to actively root for my team to lose games, but I would not be the most heartbroken by an earlier exit in Kansas City just because like save those legs, gear it all up for the NCAA tournament, which is what we know, right or wrong, coaches are ultimately judged by in this sport right now. All right. And one more to close us off here. Daniel, what's up, Daniel? Cat fan in Husker land. Guess we're going to end on some cats here to put a cap on all this discussion. Daniel says, my first K-State men's basketball game was against Billy Tubbs, OU in Ahern in 88. The Cats won, and it was awesome. That does sound pretty awesome. Not only to be able to see the great Billy Tubbs, I would have loved to have seen a game coached by Billy Tubbs and been there in that environment. But to see a game in Ahern, I mean, as the old gym K-State played in, they moved into Bramlage like right at the beginning of the 90s. I would kill to be able to have seen a game in Ahern. One of my great regrets in life that I will not be able to see a game in Ahern, which is, and this is a fact, you can go look it up, the building that Allen Fieldhouse was modeled after, Ahern Fieldhouse where K-State used to play, and it was a great, great environment. So great way to close us off there, Daniel. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Everybody who donated, liked the video. Please do like the video if you haven't yet. Anybody who just sat and watched, I sincerely appreciate your support of the channel and how much you guys take to the content. Great community we have going on here. Let's keep growing it. Spread the word on social media to your friends, families, Facebook groups of teams that you love, Facebook groups of the conference, whatever it may be. Spread the word, man. Spread the word about this channel. I sincerely appreciate you all. If you want to support on Venmo, it's John-Kurtz-4. You can support the channel for free by liking the video, by commenting on the video. All of that is great. All of that really helps, whether you love me or hate me. And Justin coming in at the final hour like always. Justin going to get the last word. our UCF fan or USF fan. Boy, Justin, I am sorry. USF fan. Let's not get that twisted. I understand what I just did there, and it is the worst. All these flashbacks going through my head of all the times I've seen people get mad about being called the Kansas State Jayhawks or the Kansas Wildcats, whatever it might be. Justin says, in a weird spot, I want the ACC to die because they helped destroy the Big East. However, the ACC might be where we end up if FSU leaves. UCF, you still suck. Justin always gets a shot in at UCF. UCF, you guys got to have somebody else come in and start beating the buzzer here if you want to get it, Justin, or he's going to keep getting that last word. I know he swept you guys in hoops this year too, so you guys are going to keep letting Justin get the last word here. Yeah, that's a pickle. That's a pickle if you're a USF fan. But I think ultimately it has to win out. Like, you want ACC survival, right? Your best case scenario is that the ACC survives in some form, and you're able to get the invite there. That's why I'm trying. People told me on Twitter I need to be a little more understanding of SMU fans being as staunchly like pro Pac-12 and kind of anti Big 12 as they are right now because they're finally getting their shot. Yeah, I get it. I should have more of an understanding there. So I will do that for you, Justin, and USF. That's going to do it for me. Take care, guys. Hit me up on Twitter at JL Kurtz if you have anything. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I will talk to you guys soon.